Thank you so much for being here today. We are very excited to have Professor Zvi Zohar for the religious significance of secular studies according to Rabbi Yosef Hayyim. And as always, a pleasure to work with our great partners, Or Tzion. And I would love to welcome Andre Ivory to introduce today's guest speaker.
Thank you, Alex. It is definitely a pleasure, as always, for Ortzion to co-sponsor such great events as this. And it's a pleasure for us to welcome Professor Zohar to be with us today. Professor Zvi Zohar is the Chauncey Stillman Professor of Sephardic Law and Ethics Emeritus at Bar Ilan University, where he taught in the Faculty of Law and in the Faculty of Jewish Studies. He has been associated for over 45 years with the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, where he is currently a senior fellow at the Kogod Research Center for Contemporary Jewish Thought. Zvi is interested in all aspects of Jewish life and thought, especially in modern times. His research focuses on the culture and creativity of Sephardic Oriental rabbis in modern times, and on the sociology, anthropology, and historical development of halakha from ancient times to the present. He has written and edited 14 books, has published more than 110 scholarly articles in Hebrew, English, French, and German, and serves on the editorial boards of Pe'amim and of Tzionut Datit. His most recent book in English, Rabbinic Creativity in the Modern Middle East, was published in 2013 by the Hartman Institute's Kogod Library of Judaic Studies in conjunction with Bloomington Academic Press. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome Professor Zvi Zohar to teach us today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I understand that where you are, it's good morning. And where I am, it's good evening, and who knows who else is joining us from around the world. Okay, my topic today that we're going to be discussing is the position of Rabbi Yosef Hayyim of Baghdad about integrating secular studies into the study program of Jewish schools. And some of you may be following developments in Israel, where one of the big public issues at this point is that there's an important segment of the population who see themselves as representing the true, authentic, traditional Jewish tradition, who hold that any time spent on studying anything that's not Torah learning is a waste of time, and it's time that, of course, for men, for boys and men, and all men should spend their entire time studying Torah subjects and not secular subjects, and this is very important for them, and there's also a similar segment like that in New York City and other places, the Satmar and other, who hold that the true position of Judaism is not to engage in secular studies. Possibly some others would contend that you could do that if you needed to earn a living. Then that could be justified because people are supposed to earn their living, and according to the Talmud, a father should teach his child how to earn a living, a profession or a trade, and therefore that would be the possible reason for allowing secular studies. But today in Israel, they have the idea that the woman could work and the men could study Torah. That as it may, we also have another attitude that is common in certain circles, which is that while in medieval times, clearly the center of Jewish creativity and learning was in Islamic countries. Then Spain began gradually to be conquered by the Christians, or Reconquista, but basically the Jews of Spain, North Africa, and the Middle East, they were the center of Jewish creativity and learning from the time of the Talmud, Geonim, Rambam, great scholars of medieval times, and the smaller section were in Europe, Rashi and the Tosafists and so on, but this is conventionally believed by many people in the Shiva circles to have ended in the 16th century, where after the expulsion from Spain, people from Spain were exiled to North Africa and the Middle East and the Ottoman Empire. But after the 16th century, when we have Rabbi Yosef Karo creating the Shulchan Aruch, the center of gravity and the important place of study and learning and Jewish religious creativity moved to Europe, specifically to Eastern Europe. And this was aided and facilitated by the fact that in general, in 19th century and early 20th century, and maybe today, Europe, it was generally perceived that in European culture in general is superior to other cultures. And somehow this also added itself to the way that European rabbis and Torah scholars related to rabbis in the North Africa and the Middle East, most of whom they didn't even take interest in, as opposed to, by the way, the rabbis in the Middle East and North Africa who bought books and followed closely the developments in the Torah world of Europe. Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, I'm now moving to Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, lived in Baghdad. He was born in 1835 and he passed away in 1909. He basically spent his entire life in Baghdad, except for a trip that he took for several months to Eretz Israel to visit the holy places. Then he came back to Babylonia, and he lived in Iraq, which was part of the Ottoman Empire. And Iraq was not at all the central part of the Ottoman Empire. It was on the border, and the Jews there over the 16th, 17th, 18th century and early 19th century faced a lot of harassment. But thanks to the developments and reforms and improvements in the governmental structure and legal structure of the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, the condition of the Jews in Baghdad improved. And they also benefited from the fact that a contingent of Iraqi Jews by the end of the 18th century and over the 19th century had discovered the subcontinent of India under British rule. And they discovered that it was very convenient for Jews. The British rule was favorable to trade and commercial activity. And there was no discrimination specifically against Jews because there were so many kinds of sects and groups in India. They didn't have a tradition of anti-Semitism in any way. And the Iraqi Jewish community in India, specifically in Mumbai and Delhi, flourished, and they became very well-to-do. And they were in contact with Baghdad and the rabbis of Baghdad, who they continued to regard as their religious and cultural leaders. In Baghdad, meanwhile, there had begun to be created schools. They had secular subjects, including, in the case we're talking about, the French Jewish organization Alliance Israélite Universelle, AIU, decided to open schools for the benefit of Jewish children in backward countries. They wanted to do this also in Russia, but the Russians didn't let them. It was the Russian Empire. So they ended up doing this in the Ottoman Empire in North Africa. And these schools were, according to a model that the people in France thought was a good model, which included both Jewish topics and secular topics. By and large, as my friend Yaron Harel has shown, the initial position of the rabbis in most countries in the Middle East and North Africa was favorable towards this development. They didn't like the fact that some of the teachers in the Alliance were tending towards secularization and lax observance of the mitzvot, but they didn't see anything wrong. In fact, they supported the idea of including secular topics in the curriculum of the Jewish school. And we have before us a couple of texts by Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, which tell us about his attitude and the way that he looked at these schools. And these are taken from two addresses, two sermons that he gave at the inauguration of new buildings for these schools in the early 20th century. So by that time, Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, who was recognized by everybody as the leading scholar of Baghdad and probably was one of the greatest rabbis in the world. And at that time, although people in Europe didn't know about him, and he was interested in all fields of Jewish creativity and Kabbalah, poetry writing, Halakha, Talmudic studies, Midrash. He made up, like Rav Nachman Mibraslav, the different stories that he told. Some of them are very interesting to analyze. And so he was very widely interested in everything. And he was also very widely interested in what was going on in the wide world at that time, which he kept track of through Hebrew language, European newspapers, European Jewish newspapers that reached Baghdad. And he was an avid reader of any book in Hebrew that he could set his hands on because he didn't know European languages. These addresses, these sermons that he gave at the opening of these Alliance schools, he made two moves. One, which is it permissible to take time away from Torah learning in order to study other topics? And then, if it is permissible, nevertheless, we don't have to do everything that's permissible. So what are the good reasons and the rationale for devoting time in the study program for secular subjects? So here we have before us, we see study, okay, these translations are mine, and I brought the Hebrew so that people who are interested to check the translation or catch the nuances of the Hebrew can do that. So he explains, Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, that the study of writing, arithmetic, and languages is defined by Maimonides as mutar. Now, where exactly this is a good question. Maybe in one of his explanations of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, which is a part of the Mishnah. In any case, Rabbi Yosef Hayyim says that secular topics, general topics, are defined as mutar, permitted. And what is the point of such a definition? To tell you, do not say, in this hour when I am studying writing and arithmetic, it is better that I instead study matters of Torah. Why should I waste my time learning writing and arithmetic? Therefore, these studies were categorized as permitted. That is, you are permitted to devote several hours of the day to such study. Now, obviously, what lies behind this is that the number of hours in a day, and certainly the number of hours that school children learn in school, are finite. So if you're studying secular general topics, that's time that's taken away from what might otherwise have been another page of Talmud, another chapter of the Bible, and so on. And then he goes on to say, it is worthy, if you could move down a bit, okay, it is worthy to teach both these types of learning to the youth while they are still young in age. Study of our Holy Torah and study of Derech Eretz, that is, languages, writing, and such like. The teachers should engage them in both types of study at the same time when they are young and their mind is clear. There are 2 points that's worthy of contemplation in this brief paragraph. One is notion or the phrase Derech Eretz. Okay. In the Birkei Avot, it says, Yafa Torah, Talmud Torah in Derech Eretz she'egiat shenehem meshakachat avon, meaning Torah study together with Derech Eretz, to be involved in both of these things is good, because by this involvement, you distance yourselves from sin. But what does Derech Eretz mean? The way of the land, the way of things are done. And there's various meanings that we find in the more ancient sources. For instance, it means that do what everybody does, earn a living. A different idea is marry. And Derech Eretz is what happens between a man and a woman when they're married. Derech Eretz could also mean a proper and appropriate behavior in various situations. You should know how to behave properly. But the notion that Derech Eretz means general topics, secular topics that are not Torah, is basically a modern notion. Would you begin to find this in certain texts from the end of the 18th century? But the person that really made this usage famous was Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch from Germany, who advocated a type of Jewish ideological orthodoxy in which you could have Torah im derech eretz, in which Torah meant Torah studies and religious behavior, and derech eretz means being attached to and involved in and knowledgeable about general studies and higher culture of, in this case, Germany. It turns out that by virtue of reading these newspapers from Europe, the rabbis in Iraq became aware of this meaning that was attributed now to Derech Eretz, and they began to employ this so that a younger contemporary of Rabbi Yosef Hayyim founded in the second part of the 19th century, a school in which he said they would study Torah topics and Derech Eretz. From Europe, this usage of Derech Eretz reached Baghdad, and Rabbi Yosef Hayyim chooses to adopt this and to say that this should be part of the study program of Jewish schools, and also that these should be studied at the same time in parallel, which is also not self-evident. In different cases, rabbis who said that, okay, there could be circumstances in which people would study secular topics after you learned all about Torah. Okay, after you fill yourself and your knowledge and your mind with Torah, so that you're chock full of Torah, then you could allow yourself to devote some time to studying extra things like the whipped cream on the dessert. But Torah should be first and should be the main thing, and only afterwards, possibly, maybe general topics. And this obviously is not what Rabbi Yosef Hayyim is advocating. He's advocating that children from the beginning of their study in school should have both of these studies in parallel. Part of the day would be devoted to this and part of the day to that. What we have here, okay, is this rabbi who was the leading rabbinic scholar of Iraq and of a first-class, world-class scholar. And he's saying that we should have in our Jewish schools, it's good to have Torah and secular studies together. And then the question behind it, why devote time to anything but Torah? So first of all, as I said to you, he was aware that certain rabbis had said, well, we could devote things to other topics than Torah, because why? Because the children have to later grow up and make a living. If they don't know various languages, we're living in Iraq, they have to know Arabic, they have to know some international language like French or English, and they have to know arithmetic so that they can follow the bookkeeping of the business. So that's the reason. It's not because these studies have any inherent value, but it's because they can be conducive later to earning a living. But Rabbi Yosef Hayyim doesn't agree with that. He says if people, what they're going to do, there was no universities in Baghdad at that time. So they'll learn, they'll know French, they'll know this, and they'll go to work in some business. He says, you know what? If we would teach them to be plumbers, then they would really earn a good living. If we would teach them to be electricians, but that's not a justification for learning arithmetic and French. So he says, let's bracket the issue of the practical, mundane advantages that you would gain from making money through secular studies. Let's talk about its contribution to the education of the person, that the child that's learning. And he says, first of all, both of these things, Torah and Derech Eretz, contribute to the formation of the student's personalities and character. And it is with regard to this is a quote, right? That the Tana in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, says, study of Torah together with Derech Eretz is fine. Yafeh Talmud Torah in Derech Eretz. For toil in the two of them drives away sin. Meaning, it is worthy and appropriate that one should engage in these two types of study, Torah and Derech Eretz, at the same time, because toil in the two of them together drives away sin, that is, the evil force that is stored in a person's heart because of his murky physicality. But by engaging in these types of study, the person will be distant from that aspect of his persona, because he will be engaged in matters of the mind, the intellect, muskalot. And the evil impulse within him will not actualize its potential in the performance of evil deeds. Okay, and this is what he says is meant, and here he moves to a pasuk, which has become a well-known verse connected to education, Jewish education, in the book of Mishlei, in the chapter of Proverbs, it says, "Chanoch lana'ar al pi darko." What this means: teach or educate the young person according to his way. And then once you do that, gam ki yazkin lo yasur mimena. Even when he becomes older, he will already be set in the proper and good path. Okay, and this, he says, the value of in joining together Torah study and secular study is what is meant by chanoch lana'ar, to guide him in a good straight path by means of words of wisdom, piety, and matters of intellect. One should thus teach and guide him while he is al pi darko, which he interprets in a very nice way, on the verge and beginning of his path, right? Al-pi in Hebrew can mean according to, but it can also mean at the verge of, like people, al-pi hatehom, at the verge of the abyss. So al-pi can mean at the, and that's how we interpret this here. Chanoch lanar al-pi darko, when he's about to embark on his life's journey. At that point, teach him Torah and derech eretz. At the verge and beginning of his path, before he has entered and become set in it, for at that time you can easily turn him from one path and lead him in another that is good and straight. Okay, so the first value of Torah and derech eretz is that both of them contribute to creating the character that will be useful and proper for the student as he moves forward in life. Okay, can we please move up? Okay, and then he says, so when is it appropriate to study these things, Torah and derech eretz? From the time the child is 7 years of age until he is 13. But if these studies are only begun once he is 13 or more, meaningful, no. First, he studied in Talmud Torah from when he's a kid until he reaches more or less high school age, and then we'll maybe open him up to general types. No, that's not good, because by that time it will be too difficult for him to really acquire the possession of these subjects. And by the way, we see this today in Israel, where young men who have only studied yeshiva studies and then they want to move ahead and maybe go to university and get a degree and so on, they can't, because their secular studies are so weak that it's very rare for someone to be able to come without a background and just move ahead. Okay, so that's one reason of forming the character. The second, acquaintance with fields of knowledge beyond Torah is mandated by reason. He says a person has a great need to study geography. It says in the Talmud, Rabbi Yosef says, woe to those persons who see and not comprehend what they see, who stand and do not comprehend in what they stand. Okay, so if you look in the Talmud, he doesn't seem to be talking about geography. According to Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, yes, he's talking about geography. A person is obligated to know and understand the qualities of the earth. And regarding those who lack this knowledge, Rabbi Yosef says, whoa, these persons see, do not comprehend what they see. We learn that these and other similar facts, a person is required to set his mind upon them and to know them. Okay, now let's go down a bit more. Then he says, okay, so I found this text. Rabbi Yossi says this, but truth be told, even without that text, reason obligates this. For how can one hear the sound of thunder and see lightning and not understand what they are? And how can one see thunder and clouds going and coming and rain pouring down upon the earth and not understand their quality and what makes them happen? How can one stand in the city of Baghdad and not know where is Eretz Israel and India and Europe, whether ahead of him or behind him, to his right or to his left? Most certainly a person lacking knowledge of these matters is degraded and lacking even in his own lives. How could somebody have self-respect if he doesn't know these basic things about nature and about geography? Now, obviously, right, we don't imagine that people in the past felt that there's something wrong with them if they don't understand what's lightning and if they're not sure where is India. This assumption by Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, that knowing these things is a basic thing, and reason indicates that people have to know about this, is itself a reflection of how Rabbi Yosef Hayyim is part of the feeling in modern times, the 19th century, that any person should know basic things about nature and about the world. And then he says, I'll tell you that this issue of wanting to learn these things was existent already in ancient times. In Baba Kama, it is told that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were sitting and studying under Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. One of them said, I want to learn halakha, teach us halakha. The other said to teach them Aggada. Now, everybody knows what's halakha, right? That's the legal part of the Torah. And Aggada is the ideational part. But Rabbi Yosef Hayyim says, no. The meaning of this seems to be that one wanted them to teach matters of tradition, Jewish studies, important halachot, and Talmudic explanations of the reasons underlying Mishnayot and Baraitot. And the other wanted Aggada, meaning general knowledge. For Rabbi Yitzchak was perfect in his command of worldly knowledge, natural science, geometry, medicine, astronomy, knowledge regarding the nature of creation, inert, plant, and animal, as well as geography. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef Hayyim now casts, not on any basis that I know about, that Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha was in fact the ideal rabbi that we would want, meaning that he knows everything about Torah, and he knows everything about general knowledge, science, geometry, medicine, and so on. And all these realms of wisdom are not part of Torah. They're not part of the hardcore of Torah. They're called Aggada. So now, if one of the rabbis in ancient Babylonian wanted to learn Aggada, and the other wanted to learn Halakha, that means that one of them wanted Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha now to teach about Torah, and the other wanted Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha now to teach something about science, medicine, and so on. And Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha could do both. The question was, at that particular time, what would he teach? Okay, let's move down. And for this reason, it says that don't say, we'll heap a heavy load upon the young person, teach him only Torah. And I will not teach him writing, Hebrew, grammar, math, knowledge of nature, and worldly matters such as geography, so that he will not waste his time on such things, but rather study only the complete and perfect Torah. Do not do that. No, you have to teach the person all the matters of the way, which is the way that he's going to find in the world when he goes out of the study hall. Okay, now let's move down we'll move more, we'll skip this part. Okay, perfection in general studies enhances Israel's honor in the eyes of all people. All Jewish persons will be perfect in knowledge of such things. Their honor will be great in the eyes of all humans. And all will say of them, this great nation is a wise and sagacious people. Am chacham v'navon hagoy hagadol hazeh. So first of all, we assume, Rabbi Yosef Hayyim assumes, following in a certain way the Torah, that it's important for Jews to be seen well and in a good light as wise and sagacious by all human beings. And how or what will bring this about? Rabbi Yosef Hayyim says, well, the meaning is that Jewish persons have to know excellently all general topics of science and human knowledge. This will get them great respect in the eyes of the other human beings. But if you look, right, in the book of Devarim, you see, all right, that in verse 5, and God says, I have taught you chukim u'mishpatim, statutes and judgments, and you will follow and act according to them. Keep them, therefore, and do them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, who shall hear all these statutes of the Torah and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So if you look at this verse in the context, you see that a very plain meaning of Torah seems to be that how will we get to be in the good light and appreciated by other human beings in the world? If we will follow the Torah, then everybody will say, oh, this is great nation is a wise and understanding people. What is Rabbi Yosef Hayyim saying? Achievements and command of general knowledge is something that's very highly appreciated in the world. It's important for Jews to know these things, and this will increase the honor and appreciation of the Jewish people in the eyes of the nations. Okay, that's another reason for studying general topics. And then he says, study of realms of knowledge beyond Torah enables tikkun olam. Okay, an additional explanation of the scripture's intent in the phrase Chanoch L'Dar Pitato is that King Solomon, who said this verse, right, because he was the author of Proverbs. So he said, Chanoch L'Dar Pitato, that King Solomon taught to teach us that a person should not reject any of the kinds of knowledge that are required for the improvement of the world and for human perfection, even though it may seem that this is knowledge of mundane and physical things. Okay, what does this mean, tikkun olam? Okay, everybody knows that's a catchphrase today in the Jewish world. Even many non-Jewish people know about this tikkun olam, meaning improving the world, bringing better social justice and environmental justice and so on, and that's tikkun olam. But if you look in pre-modern sources and also in Kabbalah, you see that that's not what tikkun olam means. In Kabbalah, for instance, the Ari, tikkun olam means that you will repair the cosmic fracture that happened at the creation and bring everything back together again on the cosmic level. A study, an article that has been written about this shows that this use of tikkun olam, as we use it today, the public uses it today, is really a quite modern thing of the mid-20th century. So what led Rabbi Yosef Hayyim to use this as we use it? It's probably the earliest known use of that phrase. And it means that if we learn general knowledge, not only Torah, we will be able to make the world a better place to live in. And it's linked also to advances in science and technology. God did not enable the minds of those who are wise in the natural sciences to be attentive and to observe these sciences until recent years, post our time, right? If these were things that are known, could be known to people who study science, why didn't King Solomon himself know about this? Why didn't other people of ancient times know about this? But God didn't want this to be made available until close to our time, when the kings made a covenant, berit, via ordinances that they enacted to improve the world, ba'avur tikkun olam, that are called tanzimat. So here he's talking about the non-Jewish authorities in the Ottoman Empire that really improved the justice system and the governmental system of the Ottoman Empire, in called Tanzimat. He says these people are engaged in tikkun olam. And because of this, steamships and telegraph, there resulted good benefit for humanity in several matters. Okay, so this type of tikkun olam is available especially to people who are knowledgeable in general studies. Some people think that when a Jew gets a Nobel Prize, oh, what a waste. He could have been a great rabbi. But if we look at it this way, a person who is involved in science, involved in advancing well-being of human people, is really serving tikkun olam, and that's what should be, and that's why Torah and general topics should be together in the study program. And finally, we'll move down to the fifth. General knowledge is a path to deepen our connection to God, okay? Because God is the creator of the world. And the more we understand the world and how things work in the world and in all aspects, then we're actually getting a connection and understanding of God. And let's look down at the second paragraph in English. He says, this idea is indicated by the verse from Shir HaShirim, right? His left hand is under my head and his right hand caresses me. Okay, now you know that the Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is understood in the traditional interpretation as representing the love and the connection between the people of Israel and God. And in this description, God is the male figure and the people of Israel is the female figure. And here we have the female figure saying, Simolo tachat leroshi, his left hand is under my head and his right hand caresses me. Then says Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, the world is indicated by the letter Vav that has the numerical value of 6 because the world has 6 extensions, up, down, and the 4 directions. And the study of Torah is called right, yamin, for it is strong and dexterous. While matters of derech eretz, which we already know is secular knowledge and secular study of all other topics, are called left, because that's less important hand. And he says in the Shir HaShirim, his left hand is under my head, meaning matters of derech eretz is under my head. I engage in this. In addition, his right hand, matters of Torah, caresses, indicating on this interpretation of Shir HaShirim that I should engage in Torah study at the same time I engage in derech eretz. Echoz mizeh al tanach yadecha. Okay, so what do we have here? That the connection of a human being to God is achieved by learning and knowledge. And through learning and knowledge, people could experience God. And one type of knowledge is Yamin, is the Torah. And the other type of knowledge is general studies. So by engaging in these 2 avenues, 2 realms of study at the same time, the student in school, okay, and when they teach today in certain religious schools, they say, okay, we're studying holy topics, Kodesh and Chol. But according to this view, both types of learning are Kodesh from a different aspect, because both of them enable somebody to feel and appreciate and get close to God. And in this sense, and if you move down, this is basically the same thing that we see with Maimonides, who writes in the beginning of the Mishneh Torah, Hilchot Yesodei Torah, there's a commandment to love and be in awe of this glorious and awesome God. But how may one discover the way to love and fear him? When a person will contemplate his works, his great and wonderful creatures, and will behold through them his wonderful, matchless, and infinite wisdom, he will spontaneously be filled with love, praise, and exaltation, and become possessed of a great longing to know the great name. Okay, as David said, Sama'an nafshi Elohim le'el chai. And then we consider these very matters, he will be taken aback in a moment and stricken with fear and awe. And realize that he is an infinitesimal creature, humble and dark, standing with an insignificant and slight knowledge in the presence of all. Why? So it's through learning about the natural world, that somebody can achieve the love and the fear of God. And in this sense, according to Rabbi Yosef Hayyim, also by integrating Torah studies on the one hand and general studies on the other hand in the program of study of a Jewish school, then both avenues of connection to God are available to the student. Okay, we'll move down to the conclusion. So we have 5 reasons for justifying integration of secular or general topics in a program of study of the Jewish school: formation of the students' personalities and character, fulfilling the obligation mandated by reason for a person to know and understand the world in which one lives, realizing that the goal of the Jewish people to be a wise and sagacious people in the eyes of the human is through achieving proficiency in these studies, empowering Jewish students to facilitate tikkun olam, and enabling Jewish students to experience enhanced closeness and connection to God by study, understanding of His self-revelation via Torah, as well as by study and understanding of His self-revelation via creation. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yosef Hayyim. These sermons were published in beginning of the first decade of the 19th century, and represent, since Rabbi Yosef Hayyim passed away in 1909, this was like his mature and full vision of how Jewish schools should operate. Okay, so if there's any questions, I understand that we have a couple of moments.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. We would be happy to take a couple questions or comments. If anyone has any, please feel free to raise your hands and we can call on people to unmute, or you can also write things in the chat as well. All right, well, I have one.
Okay.
I guess I'm just curious, since looking at, the time frame that he passed away in 1909, and if you have any sense of how religious schools feel today, if they sort of agree or disagree, and if you can speak about that a little bit.
Well, obviously today we know there's a lot of kinds of religious Jews. Some of them, as I said before, which ultra-Orthodox, or many of the ultra-Orthodox, are antagonistic to general or secular studies, and they don't see any value or inherent value of either of character formation, or we don't need the goyim to like us, so we don't want them to appreciate us. What do we care? And tikkun olam, that's not our problem. We could do this by other ways. We don't have to move out into the world and repair things. And it's not through study of general knowledge that we're going to get an appreciation of God. It's only through Torah. Okay, so that's one aspect. Then there's a lot of schools, I think in Israel and abroad, which are identified as religious schools, and they do study Torah and they do study general topics and general learning, but their attitude toward general learning is, in many cases, to my mind, it's instrumental. You do learn that, you'll get into a good college. You'll get into a good college, you'll be able to earn a good living and get a respected position in society, and so on, rather than saying, well, these studies have inherent value in them because they form character, they enable you to be close to God, they enable you to engage in tikkun olam, and so on. So in that sense, many Jewish schools that do teach general topics don't seem to be following this outlook of Rabbi Yosef Hayyim as to the value of such studies, not because of how to make a living and get a high position in society.
Thank you.
Professor, it seems like, first of all, thank you for your wonderful presentation. It seems that as an educator, and one who administrates a supplementary school and has to deal with sort of kind of the battle between what children learn in their public schools and then come to me and have to learn in the sense of religion. That Rabbi Chaim was saying that secular studies is in fact l'shem shamayim. It's for the sake of heaven, and that any contradictions that may come about with what you learn in Torah is a dispute that is worth having, that is worth understanding and trying to explore. And my question is why still in today's world is there not, especially amongst the ultra religious, the dati, why is it that secular studies are not seen as l'shem shamayim or any discussion? If they're so based in Torah, if they're so knowledgeable about Torah, they should be able to defend their argument against what is learned derech eretz, what is learned in secular society.
Well, to my mind, a lot of what we see today in the ultra-Orthodox or the very Orthodox world is a reaction against the perceived threat of modernity. And secular studies are seen as part of that external and dangerous world, that if somebody will be connected to that, they won't withstand the temptations and the inclination to abandon Torah and abandon the way of their fathers, which is not a very ancient way because Arabians themselves did this 200 years ago. So there's a general defensive feeling against the world out there, and secular studies are identified as part of that.
It's a fear of falling off the derech. It's a fear of, and while the derech in some ways in Rabbi Chaim's viewpoint is incomplete without, you can learn halakha, but if you're not, the Aggadic tradition is not frozen in time. It is actually existent in the world that you live in. If it's a safe environment for the
of the Aggadic aspect is all knowledge that's not hardcore halakha and Torah study, and that's an expansion of what many people understand when they think about Aggada. Well, that's what the rabbis said about different ideas and values that the rabbis had, but it's not physics or mathematics or psychology or geography.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It would seem so counter, and I'll finish with this, point, that it seems counterintuitive that, as part of our tefillah, we say, we thank God for a God who has provided us knowledge. But if it's limited to only Torah knowledge, then we're not appreciative of everything else that God has provided for us in the world. It's a very, I appreciate Rabbi Chaim's perspective because it is inclusive, and there are many, modern rabbis who fall in that frame of mind. That Rabbi Jonathan Sachs would be a perfect one who would say that science and Torah exist in a perfect coexistence together. But it just baffles me that there's still this divide, amongst it. But once again, thank you for providing this knowledge today.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry about sorry about my dog in the back there. Thank you so much for being with us. It was such an interesting presentation, and also thank you to Ortzion for co-sponsoring today's program. And thank you all for being with us today. Have a great day.